He turned water into wine, I turned whiskey into songs. Too many second chances, too many too far gones. Gave me grace along the way, took my heart and led me home. Don't you see, it's a God thing for me. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
Welcome to the Heartland Journal podcast with Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com.
Welcome to our very special Heartland Journal Summer Series, where we have dug deep into the archives and unearthed some of our most popular and even controversial shows of the past, many that haven't seen the light of day in years. We hope you enjoy what we have in store for you. Until I return to my post as host of the Heartland Journal podcast, this is Steve Abramowitz wishing you a safe and sane summer. And as always, glory to God. Howdy, y'all. Welcome back. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. On this show, we are focused on our nation today, with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community and lovers of truth. Welcome to our People in the News episode, where I interview people who are making an impact and are lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with Dr. Tenpenny. Dr. Sherry J. Tenpenny is an osteopathic medical doctor, board certified in 3 medical specialties, widely regarded as the most knowledgeable and outspoken physician on the adverse impact that vaccines can have on health. Dr. Tenpenny has been a guest on hundreds of radio and national television programs as outspoken advocate for free choice in healthcare, including the right to refuse vaccinations. As an internationally known speaker, she is highly sought after for her ability to present scientifically sound information regarding vaccination hazard and warning that are rarely portrayed by conventional medicine. We are thrilled to have her. She studied at the University of Toledo, graduating in 1980 with a degree in biology. Dr. Tenpenny, hello. How are you today? Thank you for coming on with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We have a little bit of an electrical storm going on out there, so if by chance the good Lord takes me offline, Steve will continue the interview off the top of his head since I have the notes. But I think we'll be fine. It seems to have subsided. But thanks again for coming on to talk about the state of the medical profession in our world today. And I'm glad you're doing well. We need you. I'm glad. So I'm not a doctor, but have a lot of questions. But first, you were a fundamentalist Christian before bouncing between Lutheran, Methodist, and Catholic traditions, and you're outspoken about that. You say so. For much of your life, you said you weren't an on fire for God person like now. Back in January of 2020, you finally said, okay, God, I'm in 100% in. Most doctors seem to think they are God, not believe or be on fire for God 100% like you. What got you there?
Oh, golly. It started probably in June or July of 19. I was speaking at a conference, and the gal who was actually the COO of the company I was speaking for, she and I were good friends. Her name was Tracy. And Tracy and I had decided that after the conference, we were going to go on a spa girls weekend, to just drive over to a resort in Pennsylvania. We were in Pennsylvania, to go to southern Pennsylvania, to go to a resort and have a spa girls weekend. And I said, okay, that sounds like fun. So we went to the spa, and at dinner time, we sat down to have dinner, and she reached her hands across the table and took my hands and said, let's pray. And I'm like, okay. So I put my head down to pray. And after we said grace for the meal, she looked up and she said, God's calling you on the team, and he's not going to take no for an answer. And we spent 3 days with her kind of beating me over the head. Seriously, at every single turn, it was something about, you've got to get on the program. God is wanting you on this team. And when I got in the car to drive home, which was about a 3-hour drive home from where we were, I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't talk to anybody. I just was like, what the heck just happened? If I would have known this weekend was going to be like this, I can assure you I would not have gone. And so over the course of the next several months, she just kept texting me and calling me, and with a much softer, more loving approach after she had kind of beat me over the head for 3 days. and then because I had this horrible relationship with church. When I was in high school, and it was just horrible because it was like Lutheran and Catholic first, and then fundamentalist. And then during that fundamentalist period of time in my life, I had a horrible relationship with the church. It wasn't abusive or anything. It was just the people that were there, and it was just not a good story. And then I spent quite a few years doing every new agey thing that you can think of, astrology and past life regressions and all of that through my 30s and my 40s. And never just, then it wasn't that I threw God out, but I didn't really embrace him either. And my mom was always praying for me and always like, you can't throw Jesus out. You just can't. I'm like, okay. And I don't know if you're old enough to remember Ross Perot when he ran for president, but he talked about, the great sucking sound, and every time somebody said church to me, I heard the great sucking sound of going back into that again. And so was always very resistant. And then after I had that thing with Tracy, and for months she's sort of nurturing this relationship, I had gone to St. Thomas and met some friends that were there that were very spiritual, very God-fearing, walk the talk sort of people. And so then at 30,000 feet on the flight home from St. Thomas is when I always get a window seat. And I'm looking out the window and I said, I surrender. God, I get it. It's like, I really get that I've been a rebellious child, for most of my life. I think I don't know, this was what, 20, so it was 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I've been a rebellious child most of my life. I just, didn't really throw the baby out with the bathwater, but certainly didn't embrace any of the truths of walking the walk with Christ and really embracing the Bible and the 10 Commandments and everything else that's about it, right? And so I said, I just cried. I cried in the airplane all the way home from St. Thomas to Newark and from Newark to Cleveland. And when I got home, I called my friend Tracy and I told her what had happened. And she said, let's pray together or praise the Lord. And that's just where it started. And from there forward, I just knew it was the thing to do. I mean, when you really commit your life to Christ, when you really embrace Jesus and you do the walk, I mean, there's no going back. I mean, it's just the way that it is. And, and then COVID came, March of 2020. It was like, okay, so this is what God wanted me to do. And I remember there was a day that I was, if you can imagine my upstairs office, I'm sitting like I am here in front of a computer, and angled over there to the side was my television. So I was watching the daily parade of Birx and Fauci and Trump and everybody. And I'm just sitting there and I'm going, Lord, what do you want me to do with this? I mean, what do you want? What do you want me to do? You called me to this playing field. What do you want me to do? And it was the second time in my life that I heard in my spirit, the Lord say out loud, carpet bomb the neighborhood. And I went, really? What does carpet bomb mean? And so I had to kind of look it up. I mean, I knew about it as a war term, with bombing things. But when you look it up in Webster, I mean, what carpet bomb really means is to disseminate as far, wide, and deep and as quickly as possible, whatever it is that you're disseminating. I mean, if you're in an airplane, it's bombs, So I got the idea that God really wanted me to go to work and really warn his people, warn everybody, his people or not his people, about what was coming, of the myth of the mask, the fraud of the PCR testing, the nonsense of the social distancing. And then, of course, when the COVID shots came on board at the end of 2020, I spent all of 20 and 21 really hammering it. I was doing sometimes 5 and 6 and 7 interviews in a day. I said to Michelle, when I heard that message from the Lord, I said, well, buckle up, Buttercup. We got a lot of work to do. And that's really what we've been doing and how I've been doing it and why. And then at the beginning of 2020, I knew I had a lot of, or 22, I'm sorry, at the beginning of 22, I knew I had a lot of speaking engagements coming up. And so I was praying about it. And I said, Lord, what do you want me to talk about this year? I mean, I'm kind of tired of talking about COVID. I've been nonstop for the last, 2 years. What do you want? And it was the third time that I heard out loud him say, repent was the word. So all of my speeches and everything that I talked about all the way through 2020 was about getting your life right with Christ, giving your life to Jesus and getting your life right with God, because it was the only thing that mattered. And if you'd taken the jabs, ask for forgiveness, you had violated the temple. You really did. You really needed to, because according to 1 John 1, verse 9, he is always willing to forgive us when we confess our sins by his righteousness. And so that's on big stages and lots of radio interviews and stuff like that. That was the message of all of 22. And then 23, it's more about what can I do to help people get better. So, and
Yeah.
it's every day, you know, when I started my online Bible study, it was 5 nights a week. It was called Happy Hour with Dr. T. And it was not really a Bible study. It was more like a Bible discussion. And when I first started that, I'm like, Lord, what? What? You want me to go on the radio and talk on the podcast about the Bible? I don't know that much about the Bible. And as much as I knew, I kind of forgot. And I just remember, you know, and he said, well, you know, I said to people, when you get called before councils, don't be afraid. I'll give you the words. And so that's what I just stood on. That he was going to tell me what to say. And the second thing bugged the heck out of me, they just kept poking me with, was the verse that said, if you're not willing to confess me before men, I will not confess you before my Father in heaven. And heaven only knows I didn't want that bad thing happening to me. So I'm like, I better be obedient and do what he tells me to do. So that's what I did.
Well, thank you for your testimony. That is amazing. And we are lucky that you do it so publicly, because I think it is influential. The first time I ever heard about you, the quote that sticks in my mind was tyranny of the mask. I'm not going to put on a mask. I know they don't work. That's not what we were hearing from everybody else at the time, but you were saying that. How did you, well, I mean, obviously you studied very, very hard and practiced very, very long in 3 different medical disciplines to switch, and then of course learn the Bible and be able to speak on the Bible. Piece of cake, I'm sure. But how did you know that the mask was being used for non-health purposes? Tell us about your relationship with the mask over the last 3 years.
Well, it didn't take long to do just a moniker of digging through medical literature to start finding published literature that shows that masks don't do anything except make the person who wears them sick. They were never designed to stop transmission, never designed to protect anything. And then the argument became, well, what about surgeons? Well, if you read the history of masks and surgery, it's because when surgeons are doing surgery, they're looking down the whole time. They're not out here looking at people. They're looking down at their surgical field, and they're asking for instruments and that. And when they're speaking, because they want a scalpel or whatever, the mask was intended to stop spittle from going into the open surgical wound. I mean, and that was all it was intended for. And then, you know, you just read more and more about what was the hit. So, and I really like history. I spend most of my time, or not most of my time, but almost every presentation that I do, I have some nugget from history there, because if we don't know from where we came, we will repeat the lessons over again. And so when you start looking back historically, where did they use masks? It was in the the conquerors put masks on their people that were conquered, their slaves, to keep them from talking. And also that represented, you know, to the world, everybody who saw them, that they were a slave because they had on this mask. And so the combination of the lack of medical efficacy, I mean, I would say to people, you know, you wear that dirty thing all day long. I mean, some of the people that would wear them forever, and they were filthy dirty. And it's just like spitting on your face, in your hand, and rubbing it on your face all day long. I mean, just spit in it and rub it on your face. So I tried to give really gross examples so people would get what they're doing, because that's exactly what was happening. And that these people would wear the same mask forever until it literally fell apart. And one day, the only time I ever wore a mask was the few times during that period of time that I had to fly on an airplane, because they were militant about it, and particularly on United, and that's usually who I fly. They were militant about the mask. And one day by accident, you know, as soon as I got out of the airplane, I ripped it off and stuck it in my pocket. And I usually wore like a sweatsuit, you know, when I travel on the planes. I put it in my pocket and I threw the sweatpants in the washer, and the mask came out lovely. It was clean and it was washed and it didn't fall apart. And I thought, I wonder how many times you can wash this before it starts to fall apart. It was after about the 10th time it ran through the washing machine cycle that the edges started to get frayed and it started to fall apart. Then I thought about, like, on a global perspective, that I had read somewhere that we were putting something like 3 billion masks into the environment. Where's all the environmentalists when you need them? I mean, why weren't they saying you can wash these things? You don't have to throw them in the yard in the garbage. You do, really, P.S. You don't need to wear them at all. But if you're going to wear them, wear a clean one. And the ones, those blue ones, these were blue surgical masks right out of a box. You can wash them. So it's cut down on the environmental pollution. But not a word was said about that. And I'll tell you, there was plenty of times when I got on airplanes, I wanted to go up to the front. And after the little flight attendant does their whole little thing about sit down and flash your seatbelts, I wanted to say, give me that microphone. I'm going to tell these people on here to wash their masks and not throw them in the garbage.
That would have been a public service announcement for sure. Now, that wasn't your first rodeo when it came to, things that were being told from above on the people down below and how they reacted and misused that information, because you wrote a book in 2006, I believe, Fowl, Bird Flu, It's Not What You Think. Tell us about that experience, because that was obviously, COVID was not a thing. I guess COVID-19 was not a thing. What did you learn in Fowl that people could have done differently had they known about it last couple of years?
Yeah, that was really fun. I wrote it in 2005 in real time when everything was going on with the PrEP Act and with all of the, nefarious legislation that Bush 2 was putting into place. And I went to Washington, D.C. They had these about every other month, they had these pandemic preparedness meetings. And so I got a press pass to work for an alternative press company, which somehow they honored it. And they let me to go in because it was supposed to be for, journalists only. Well, I'm a journalist, I write, so I'm going to go. And it was amazing. The things that I learned and the things that they were putting in place that you could see that and I went through all the World Health Organization documents when they started defining countermeasures and covered countermeasures, which we now know are military terms that they're using, that they started that in 2005. And I started putting together, I took kind of a 30,000 foot view and said, where are these outbreaks? I mean, mostly they were in Vietnam and Southeast Asia where they were having these big outbreaks. And I found some maps, some aerial maps from old documents from the Vietnam War, where they had done the heaviest amount of aerial spraying with dioxin, and they overlaid exactly the maps where all of these outbreaks of N5H1 were coming about. So I started digging through the medical literature, and I found that if you took a garden variety influenza virus and you exposed it specifically to dioxin, it became 10 to 100 times more virulent. So then so what I really came away with, and the whole point of the book and why the subtitle says, bird flu, it's not what you think. It was an environmental problem, that it had to do with environmental dioxin. The next big outbreak they had of bird flu was in Indonesia, where they have massive amounts of paper mills that they use dioxin in bleaching the paper. And so there was dioxin there. And so, and then in China, when they started having outbreaks there's hundreds of millions of tons of chemicals and garbage that goes into the Yellow River and the Yangtze River in China, where they were having these outbreaks. And so they were culling all these billions of chickens, murdering all these chickens for no reason whatsoever, because this was an environmental outbreak. And I believe it was a chemical warfare. And then I found in some old military books from World War I that World War I was the first and only time to date that we've had massive chemical warfare on the theater. And the mustard gas and all the different things that kind of rolled out of those chemicals and became our chemotherapeutic agents, of course, but that could go around the world. And I made some documents of saying, well, you think this can't fly around the world? Well, when a volcano goes off and Mount Pinatubo went off, the dust circulated the world for years. And so could some of the things spread been aerosolized and spread in the air currents? So I took a very different approach, that this was an environmental catastrophe, that they were like, look over there, it's a virus that we can create a vaccine for instead of cleaning up the globe, which kind of is what's happened now, right? I mean, we are just, instead of cleaning up the globe, we fake a virus, we contrive an illness, we get everybody to sit down and social distance and put on a mask and take an experimental product, an experimental bioweapon into our body, ostensibly to keep us from getting sick. What shocks me the most about all of this, Steve, is that the whole world just rolled over and rolled up their sleeve.
Yeah.
They didn't, nobody, they closed the churches. How many pastors actually revolted that they had closed their churches and said, okay, we
not
can't
enough,
get
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, we can't get together and pray on Sunday, but don't forget to show up on Tuesday when we have our shot clinic.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's astonishing to me. If the stats are true, which I don't know that I believe any stat that comes from the CDC or from the World Health Organization, but they say that upwards to 80% of the world population has had at least one jab. And if that is true, that's a devastating statistic. Devastating.
Yeah, I want to get into the weeds on that in a minute. But if I neglected to mention it in your bio, I just want to say you're from Ohio.
I am Cleveland.
With friend of the show, Ohio Brett Bowles. I've been on his show. He hasn't been on our show. You had mentioned, or it was mentioned, that you were trying to raise $100 million to create Christian training centers that will equip trainees to protect businesses that have donated to Black Lives Matters activists and support those who speak out against this global government tyranny. I don't get that. I think the headline I read and the clip I took it from must be inaccurate, because I don't understand the Brett Bowles Black Lives Matter $100 million connection. Can you just clarify that? And then I want to talk about
it. Back in, it would have been September of 21, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
September of 21, Coach Dave Daubenmire and Brett Bowles and I met at a conference called the Go Therefore Conference, which, by the way, I'll give them a plug. They've got a conference coming up here at the end of the month. It's a great Christian conference. So we met at that conference and we sort of contrived this idea that we would get together and raise money for Christian centers. And I really wanted to raise money to come up with solutions for the people that had gotten these jabs. And that name of that organization was called the ChristianRevolution.net. And we were together for about 4 months and it just didn't work. The personalities, just didn't work. And it just didn't work. So we folded that. It happens, right? So we folded that December of 21. I still maintain contact with Brett and good friends with Coach Dave, but we kind of all went our separate ways. And so that was just wherever you took that quote from, it was kind of old and kind of in passing.
Yeah, I think it was an Ohio newspaper, but the goal was obviously to protest businesses that had donated to Black Lives Matter, who in hindsight all got ripped off anyway, because Black Lives Matter ended up absconding with all the money, using it to buy houses. So, but I get it. Okay, so it didn't happen. That's no big deal. But you did testify to the Ohio House Health Committee in June of 2021, claiming COVID-19 vaccines magnetize. I remember seeing video clips, very graphic, not from you, but out there in the world, that there was magnetization happening. What was that? Whatever came of that? What in the world was that all about?
Great question. And thank you for asking it. Because when I testified, because I have to give you a little backstory. So the night before I was going down to testify, because I'd been asked to testify by one of the state reps who asked me to come down and testify. And what we were really testifying about was mandatory shots, flu shots and COVID shots when they were coming, COVID shots, and mask use. That was what I was supposed to come down and talk about. So the night before I drove down to Columbus, because I live in Cleveland, so it's 2.5 hour drive. But the night before I went down there, I prayed really hard and I said, Lord, we have to get this to a bigger level. There's not enough people that are hearing this message that these shots are harming people. There's not enough people that understand that this is a scam and it's harming them and their families, and it's going to be really bad. Lord, you're the Alpha and the Omega of my life. You see the beginning and the end. I barely see 2 feet in front of me. Whatever it takes to get this on a bigger platform so people can actually hear it. I'm in, whatever it takes, whatever the fallout is, consequences. I trust that you're going to use me in the best possible way for your people. So next day I go down and I testify. And in every question, the question that was asked that never gets repeated is when the state rep there, who's a pediatrician and not one of my favorite people, she asked me the question, have you seen any unusual side effects that may be caused by these shots? And I said, well, I'm sure that a lot of people have seen across the internet these people that appear to be have some sort of a magnetic charge to them, that they can put keys and phones and different metallic things on their body, and it seems to stick. Somebody should look into that. That was the question, and that was the answer. But mainstream media had a heyday with that, and 2 years later, they still are. The next night, Brian Williams was mentioning me by name, this crazy person who thinks that people get magnetized, this vaccine conspiracy theory, and it was Brian Williams and Jimmy Kimmel and
well, the worst of it was CNN's Jake Tapper and Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who's supposed to be a trusted doctor voice in the world doing what you just said that God wants you to do, spread the word. They quickly debunked you and tried to make you into that lunatic. So it was, in my humble opinion, it was that doctor.
What just happened. Everybody thought that was such a terrible thing. And how could they do that to me? I was praising the Lord. I was like, yes, Lord, look at all of these people out in mainstream media that would never have heard any of this. It almost crashed our website because so many people were coming to the website. Who's this Dr. Tenpenny character person? And going out and looking at all these different things. And I've just sort of laughed about the whole thing, saying that was God in action, that he put me in that place to answer those questions, that even today, they're still writing articles about that. In fact, I've said, if they're still writing about something I said 2 years ago, I'm not causing enough trouble. I need to go out and shake the bushes a few more times, because all of a sudden there were millions of people who said, is that right? And they started looking at things on YouTube and on Rumble, and they saw all these people that had these keys. And I'll tell you another little story that happened from that. Probably maybe 6 or 8 weeks after that, I was asked to speak at a local patriot movement here in Northeast Ohio. And the guy who had set it up and invited me to come, the night before the meeting, he and his wife had gone out to dinner, and his wife had taken the jab and he had not. And so she said, oh, you're having that crazy doctor who thinks people get magnetic from taking the jab. You're having her speak at our meeting. He's like, yeah. She said, give me a key. So he gave her a key and he put it on her forehead and it stuck. And she's like, no way. Give me a different key. So like they went through the series of keys. She put it on her arm and it stuck every time. And she's like, oh my goodness, maybe there is something to this.
Unbelievable.
So it was God, as far as I'm concerned about that, Steve, that was God in action, that he used me. And yeah, I got beat up and oh well, I've always said a lot of times, when you're going to be the lead pony, you expect bullets in the chest and arrows in the back. And
so
the arrows in the back
leads me to this perfect
the arrows
question.
in the back are the hard ones, because that's friendly fire. Those are tough.
It is. And that leads me to this perfect segue to this question. Governor DeWine of Ohio in 2014 signed a bill that basically banned public schools, universities from requiring the COVID-19 vaccine and not allowed to discriminate either for who has not received a vaccine. But on the 4th of July, 3 days ago, he signed the state's budget, but Ohio is one of those states where the governor has a line item veto. They have that there. He vetoed 44 items, one of which was the student vaccine rules. The budget would have allowed Ohio college students to decline mandatory vaccines for medical, religious, or personal reasons. How could he flip like that? Knowing all this, just like you said, the gal you went to dinner with, all she had to do was put a key on and she could see for herself that you weren't making it up. He was there during the COVID pandemic. This was 2 days ago. How can he do this?
Somebody had to check his bank account. They had to track down his offshore bank account and find out where the deposits came from. And I say that tongue in cheek. I don't have any idea if that's really true. But, when the guy from Veritas, from Medical Veritas, interviews the guy from BlackRock and says, we can buy any politician for $10,000. That goes all the way up and all the way down. And if you've got multiple people buying you for multiple tens of thousands of dollars, you'll kind of be the puppet and do whatever you're told. It does. I didn't know that what you just said is news to me. I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me. DeWine is, in my personal opinion, ranks as one of the worst governors in the country. And he's he sought a statewide ban on flavored tobacco products, supposedly to protect kids and health. So what the heck? I mean, he's a Republican. Okay, whatever. He's a rhino.
He says so that he's a Republican, right? But he's in government. These aren't vaccines. He's now allowing kids, to not decline them for religious reasons. Let's just talk about
And
that.
he's going to eat that one. He's going to eat that one because as we, hold on a second here. Sorry.
We just don't have advocates in government against these vaccines, do we?
Well, we don't. I mean, I'm happy to volunteer. Anybody wants to ask me, but that whole thing about refusing to allow people to declare a religious exemption. I mean, that's getting passed everywhere. I mean, just got passed in the military, that people have been dishonorably discharged because of trying to exercise their religious right or their religious rights to refuse being injected with an experimental product. I mean, these products are still experimental. They still are issued under EUA. They're not FDA approved. We still don't know what's in all of them. The data that comes out of Germany and the Netherlands tells us, and somewhat in the UK, tells us more than anything that we're learning here in the US. And so it's, and I personally believe there will come a time, and maybe it's just my faith speaking here, that there's going to come a time when all of these people who continue to push people to get these shots, particularly now, where the evidence is irrefutable about, the hockey stick increase in death and disabilities, and all of Ed Dowd's work, all the things that he's looked at with his book, died sudden or cause unknown, and so it's all of that, that the amount of disability that we have in this country now, people that are disabled and can't work. It's 11 times the standard deviation. It's 2 times the standard deviation would be a once in 100-year event. 4 times would be catastrophic amount of disability. We are at 11 times standard deviation. And so, and I had said at the beginning of this year, and I maintain it's going to be true, sadly true, that by the end of 23, there will not be a single person in America that doesn't have a friend, a coworker, a family member, somebody that they know that hasn't died suddenly, dropped over dead, didn't wake up in the morning, went to bed, didn't wake up. My business partner knows over 70 people in his circle that have died from the jab. And if people are willing to step past their cognitive dissonance and make the connection, sooner or later, the 100th monkey is going to show up, and we're going to have a tipping point of people that are probably not Christians. They're probably not related to faith at all. Maybe they will be Christians, but we're going to reach a tipping point in this country of rage, where people are finally going to figure it out that our government and our Department of Defense and our companies that work here murdered us. They killed us. They, when Pfizer in their court documents said, you can't sue us for fraud. We delivered exactly what the government told us to deliver. We delivered exactly what the DOD wanted.
Liability free.
Our Department of Defense has murdered I just had a conversation with somebody about this earlier today who's in the reserves. All of the young, healthy people that had to get these jabs in the Army and the Air Force, the pilots, all of these people who are now either injured or dead. And the recruitment level into the armed services right now is absolutely almost non-existent. None of the young people are wanting to be part of the military because they don't want to go overseas and shoot anybody. And even the ones who do want to volunteer to be part of the military, they're disqualified because they're obese, they're on some sort of psychiatric medication, or they're on or they're just not, physically able to go into the armed services. We have decimated our country, our businesses, our military without firing a single bullet.
Yeah. Well, you said 80% of the world, so it's going to be with us for quite a while. I don't want to run out of time, and I don't want to segue too hard, but I did want to just get through some of these things that I found out about you, and some of them are badges of honor, in my opinion. But you were among 12 people named by the Center for Countering Digital Hate in 2021 report titled "The Disinformation Dozen" with now presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Any thoughts on that list and being one of those dirty dozen?
It's interesting because when I gave that testimony down at the State House in Columbus in 21, that same rep said to me, well, you're listed as one of the disinformation dozen. I said, yep. And I wear it like a proud badge. She didn't know what to say about that, because I do. And now that that injunction just came out of Missouri 2 days, yesterday on July the 4th,
right.
That injunction that says that the government, 155-page injunction that this judge wrote. It was the length of a book, 155 pages of documentation showing that the U.S. government colluded with big tech and with the FBI and the DOD and the Department of Justice to infringe on large sector of Americans' freedom of speech, our First Amendment right. And I just recently, because I just wrote for my Substack, I wrote a Substack. I write a Substack twice a week. One is called I Am the Evidence. I try to post that on Saturday. Then I write a second one called Walking with God on Sunday. It's kind of my sermon moment that I do on Sunday mornings. And my one this week was the Bible and our Constitution. And I wrote in there that it was a really good time to go back and review what the first 10 amendments were, actually what the first, however many, the first 10 for sure. And when I went back and reread the First Amendment, it really said so much about what we've been beaten up with in this scandemic thing, because the First Amendment isn't only the right to speak, it's the right to have to serve and worship God. It's the right to congregate. It's that the government will not be involved in creating a church or showing favoritism to churches. Well, they've showed favoritism to the Church of Satan, in my opinion, because they will not allow prayer in school, but they allow after school Satan clubs to show up on the same property. And so we are in big trouble in this country. And I'm really proud to be called one of the disinformation dozen and be part of those people. And we started a hashtag. It was called #more-than-12. Because there was a whole lot more than just 12 people who were going out and telling the truth about what was going on.
And Facebook removed you.
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I got reinstated to Twitter, and they reinstated me with 100,000 followers, which was amazing. Wow. So I got reinstated on Twitter, still banned permanently from Instagram, Facebook, PayPal, and Podbean. And I started this podcast, and in 8 months had 1 million downloads on my podcast. And on the same day that I get this automated email from Podbean saying, congratulations, you just had your 1,000th download, they wiped my entire account. Gone, permanently banned.
Well, now maybe with the Missouri thing, you could sue all of these people if you wanted to take the time and the money to do it. But
there may be some class actions that I would get involved with. I wouldn't do it just one-on-one. It's too much money and too much time. But if they get hundreds of people, because we lost millions of followers, and I know that people that had bigger followings than I did, like Mercola and Rasha Buttar and Agreement Info with Sayer G, and they had even bigger followings than I did, in the Bollingers. So collectively, there were hundreds of millions, literally hundreds of millions of accounts that were wiped clean over this censorship issue that is now going to blow up in their face.
Would make quite the class action lawsuit. Of course, I had 100,000 followers on Parler, but I'm nobody. I'm not even interesting. So there are people who wanted to hear and they don't get to. One of besides RFK Jr., who's now back in the news, one of your few voices, I guess we call them, compatriots, Dr. Simone Gold, facing charges in connection to the January 6, 2021 Capitol riots. You were pro-Trump too. He seems to be taking credit for the vaccine still. Do you think he can win and fix the NIH and FDA?
That's a really good question, which puzzles many of us. Because I know personally that that information has been delivered to Trump through General Flynn, hand-delivered, and had a 3-hour meeting over all of these things and problems associated with these shots. And most of us that kind of are in like Clay Clark's group, the Awakening tours and speaking and doing those things, that is the perpetual question. I mean, because nobody can understand what the real reason is why he won't step away from those shots. Some people say he took money from Pfizer. Some people say it has to do with the bank that funds the WEF, calling loans. Some people said that it's his ego. He can't go back and say, gee, I was wrong, which, he could. And how he could do it easily would be to put all the blame on Birx and Fauci. I'm a business guy, man, and I'm trying to run the country. I
said it
trusted
for a
them.
year. Yeah. Yeah.
I trusted them. And Birx admitted in writing that she lied to the president. Why
In her
isn't
book,
she arrested? And so
he gave him
I think
commendations instead.
exactly. So do I think that he can win and still stand like he thinks that, because he keeps saying this, it should be freedom of choice. The shots should be available. But I did this great thing by making these shots. No, Mr. Trump, you have blood on your hands. And it's time for you to go to the sink and wash them and get rid of it and stand up for what we now know 3 years later is the truth. If you couldn't do it, didn't want to do it in year 1 or year 2, it's year 3 and it's election year. You're either going to have to get in or get off, and you've lost a huge swath of your followers by the position that you've taken. So I don't know. I don't really know. This whole thing with, and I think that a lot of people aren't protesting and doing what we should be doing to stand up because of J6. Because people are like, well, there's cameras everywhere watching me now. And I just got a text earlier today that they're starting biometric screening at LAX, that you can't get on an international flight out of the country unless you go through facial recognition and iris scanning at LAX to get an international flight. So it's happening here, and nobody's revolting. Nobody's saying,
they don't know how.
What? We're not going to do this. What do you mean? You're going to microchip me and for my convenience? I'll take that, and I'll take that mark of the beast too, because I'm tired of you people talking about it.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
That's scary.
So I mentioned the NIH. The NIH funds just about every college and university in the world, if not America alone. You can Google, or your favorite, DuckDuckGo, whatever it is, any school, and add the letters NIH, and you'll see billions doled out constantly, daily. Do you think they and DARPA funded gain of function at such places as UNC and USC before and after moving to Wuhan?
I think that's pretty well been defined, that the answer to that is yes. And that Fauci's had his dirty hands all over it, and Barrick's had his dirty hands all over it from the whole time along. And I do think that that's one of the reasons why Americans are kind of discouraged. I mean, the evidence is irrevocable. I mean, it's out there everywhere. It's in print. It's on podcasts like this. It's on YouTube. It's on Rumble. It's on Instagram, and it's everywhere. And with documentation, proven documentation, nothing's happened. Nobody's been arrested. Nobody's gone to jail. Nobody's, life goes on. I just got a report today that the Bank of International Settlements and the Federal Reserve have put out their actual play plan for how they are going to introduce the central bank digital currency. Mm. And once that happens, if people, because I'm just so concerned that people, countries die because of apathy, and I'm just so concerned that there's so many people that are apathetic, that are just going to go along to get along, because COVID's behind us now. I can go on vacation whenever I feel like it. I don't have to wear a mask. I'm pretty much back what I want, and I'll do anything to not have to go through that again. And that is a really, really big concern.
Yeah, well, it's just, so we see that in voter apathy. Aaron Hertzberg is with the Brownstone Institute, and he recently said CDC is concealing references to a COVID vaccine on Minnesota death certificates. In almost every death certificate that identifies as COVID vaccine as a cause of death, the CDC committed data fraud by not assigning the ICD-10 code for vaccine side effects to the causes of death listed on the death certificate. Finally, the actions of the CDC call into question whether the CDC is altogether qualified or trustworthy enough to be the steward of the nation's epidemiological data. The CDC manages many of the data sets that underpin whole fields of study. You have 3 of them. If the CDC is willing to fraudulently alter data, or even if the CDC is just too incompetent to avoid corrupting data, all data under the aegis of the CDC is potentially suspect, especially if it relates to a controversial political or social issue. The implications of this are disturbing, to say the least, he says. What do you think about the CDC and all your years of experience being in the medical field?
He's spot on. He's absolutely spot on. And we know that even at the beginning of COVID, the VAERS database that, has been in place since 1986, where people could go in and report their injury, we know that they were 4 to 6 to 8 months behind when people of reporting anything or posting it. We also know that they discount, if people reported deaths, they didn't put them into the VAERS database. They just kind of tossed those aside. We'll get to those later, which they never will. There was a study that was just published, tried to be published in the Lancet by Peter McCullough and Paul Alexander and a few other people, that they looked at 336, I believe, autopsy cases, and like 86% of them were determined to be caused by the shot. And the Lancet took it down in like half a nanosecond and said that this didn't even follow, appropriate technology and or scientific method. Well, Peter McCullough is one of the most highly published physicians in our country and has been on all kinds of panels. You know that he's going to do it correctly because he would know how volatile that information would be. So here we go again, more censorship, more hiding. I mean, we knew this from the very beginning, Steve. I mean, people that they would put on their death certificate, cause of death, COVID, when their real cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. Right. And so the data has been so corrupted in our government. We know inside of the military databases, when the military guys would go into their flight surgeons or to to report that they were having these horrible, terrible side effects, all the cases of cancer, all the different things that are coming up, that the military actually went in and reversed their chart records. They changed their chart to say that they got the shots after they were diagnosed with the cancer, not before. I mean, they altered the records. I mean, that's in out here in the regular world. If a doctor goes in and does something like that, it's a felony. I mean, you go to jail for stuff like that. But our government is wanting to hide this and hide this and hide this. So they know that they've done wrong. But our Department of Justice is so lame. I don't know that how we're ever going to get to them. I guess we're going to have to pray and have some luck, like we did with that judge in Missouri that signed that injunction about the infraction of freedom of speech. And we're going to have a couple of more strong, bold attorney generals, like we had the attorney general in Missouri and Louisiana, that were not going to back down. And they got all of their case in order. And to have, and this is just a preliminary injunction. It's 155 pages long, saying that the government had spied on people and impacted on their freedom of speech. And it was the biggest assault on the American people and our Constitution ever in the history of this country.
Yeah, and it had some teeth because apparently there was a Biden administration Facebook meeting that was canceled just on the heels of that because they are going to go abide by that. Steve Kirsch, I know just yesterday, July 5th, he wrote, "The most damaging paper of the pandemic, which is now 2.5 years old, has just been published in the Lancet." I want to talk about that. Quote, "I was right. The COVID vaccines have killed massive numbers of people and the government covered it up. The paper published as a preprint shows 74% of deaths post-vax due to the vax. The results are strongly consistent with the Schwab paper, where 71% of the deaths appeared to be consistent with a vaccine death. They basically were looking for the cleanest proof of death, but it's likely that all 71% of the cases, 25 out of 35, died from the vaccine. It's just harder to prove that." So A, the Lancet removed it, like you just said, less than 24 hours after posting it. That's unethical. McCullough and Risch, I believe is his name.
Harvey Risch.
So they wrote it. Are the most respected scientists in the world. So we just really can't discredit them. We can discredit the Lancet, however. Are the medical journals compromised? And B, what do you think now that this report that confirms Schwab before it, will anything change? I mean, stick that in DeWine's inbox and he has to, what would you call it? Repeal his own line item veto against the schools.
See, that's why I think that people are still trying to maintain the party line. It's just going to blow up in their face. They're not, if any of these students want to exercise their religious freedom, I mean, Ohio is one of, I believe it's 16 states left, maybe 15 states left, that has a philosophical exemption still in the childhood pediatric schedule, that all you have to do is say, no, thank you. And you don't have to get any shots for school. You have to, write a letter. The doctor doesn't have to write it. The parent has to write it. And all it has to say is, I'm exercising my right to refuse. And if you really want to get fancy, you can go and put in the statute number and say, according to the statute, I have a right to refuse. But really, the only variation is that some schools want you to submit that letter every year. Some schools, it's like you do it for elementary school, middle school, and then high school. Some schools want both parents to sign it. Some schools want it notarized. So there's some little clerical things that are different. But nonetheless, in the state of Ohio, you have the right to refuse anything, and that's K through 12. Now, if they are not going to allow college students the right to exercise their religious freedom, there's going to be lawsuits all over the place. DeWine is going to be forced to repeal that.
Well, I hope so. Here in Tennessee, they like to say that the legislature passes lawsuits, not laws. So, we all know how many vaccines were forced in the school year of 2023 while it was being fought out in the courts that they didn't actually have to do it. And then, of course, we have all the long-term disabilities and repercussions like you're talking about. Peter McCullough, you mentioned him. He has a Substack too.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to Steve Kirsch's comments, COVID-19 vaccine is the culprit in majority found dead after injection. That's quite the headline. Holscher et al. Have published the largest accumulation of autopsy results in deaths after COVID-19 vaccination. From a total of 325 cases, independent review found the COVID-19 vaccine was the cause of death in 73.9%. The vast majority had the cardiovascular system as the single fatal organ system injury to the body. The mean time for vaccination to death was 14.3 days. Most deaths occurred within a week from last vaccination administration. A total of 240 deaths, 73.9%, were independently adjudicated as directly due to or significantly contributed to by COVID-19 vaccinations. The facts are out. How come this thing is banned from planet Earth? I mean, we're talking about mRNA, right? We're not even talking about the flu shot, the polio shot, the other long list of shots that exist. Why can we not just say, oops, we made a big mistake, be gone, never do this again? 74% is a lot.
It's because of the depopulation agenda that's attached to these shots.
That's I said that
from the very beginning, way in March 2020, in March or April, maybe May of 2020, when I'd be in an interview like this and somebody would say back then, what do you think the end game is, Dr. Tenpenny? What is this all about? And it just came out of me. It was like, spirit just moved through me. This is a depopulation agenda. And those that aren't dead will be left chronically sick or moved into the transhumanism movement. They will be actually electronically connected to the Internet of Things, and they will be judged and monitored by their social credit score designed for China by Google. And I would say that, and it would be like, who said that? Where did that come from? But it's proven to be exactly what it is. It's a depopulation agenda. They openly say they want at least 3.5 billion people off the planet, and it looks like they're going to get it. And, the transhumanism movement is real. I mean, Yuval Noah Harari, who says, what do we need humans for? The best thing that we can do with humans right now is keep them drugged up and paying attention to their video games. We don't really need humans anymore. We will soon have, Chat GPT and all the artificial intelligence will be able to write a real Bible that isn't like man written and attached to some fabricated thing up in the sky. We will write a real Bible that people can read through through AI. And we don't need, we are God. We are God. This whole thing about feeling like there is this thing up in the air and all these other things. So as in Jesus, when is Jesus coming back? He said, well, I don't really know, folks, but you will know by the signs. And it will be like as in the days of Noah. And that is exactly where we are. I've written a couple Substacks about that. People got mad at me for writing it. They're like, we want you to write upbeat, happy things. I said, well, you got to take the good with the bad, and you need to get real about the fact of where we are in terms of the transhumanism movement, all the transgender stuff. God created man and woman. He didn't create 161 different genders. It didn't happen. He didn't say, oops, I made a mistake, little boy. You really should be a little girl. Let's whack off your reproductive organs and give you a girl name. And now you are magically a girl. I mean, this is not
2 by 2 on Noah's Ark, not 157 flavors like you just said.
Right.
It's a sad truth. And most of my critics will say, why didn't you push back? And it's like, you know what? I think you're right. I'm going to say it out loud. I don't to hear a thing that you just said that anyone would say like, she's a conspiracy theorist, crazy person. No, I think you got the stats. I have the receipts. Alex Berenson July 2nd, Very urgent. So I want to read it. The fertility crisis in mRNA countries is deepening. Most notably, several nations that had stable birth levels before the mRNAs were introduced in 2021 had seen sharp drops since. Sweden has about 115,000 births annually from 2012 to 2021. Last year, births plunged to 105,000. In 2023, they are tracking below 100,000. Germany has a similar trend. What do you say about what people put into their bodies and how it affected fertility?
Well, we knew from early on that it, the messenger RNA and the spike protein attacked the ovaries, as they also attacked the testicles, hence the turbo cancers we're seeing in young men with testicular cancer. This whole concept of turbo cancer is a new term. We never had this term in medicine before.
Never heard
and
it, no.
it's meaning that from the time you're diagnosed till the time you're dead is months, weeks, and sometimes only days. And so it's accelerant. And so now we've attacked the ovaries and the testicles. Well, of course, we're going to have a drop in the fertility rate, and it's a part of the depopulation agenda. I mean, after all, if they've spent all this money and all this effort to murder 3.5 billion people, they certainly don't want those young people procreating and filling back up the pot. I mean, heavens, we can't have that.
Right, that would undo the mistake that they made. Robert Malone, we all know him. I liken him to Indiana Jones, just by his look, maybe not his adventurism, but he is a brave man. He said, because of the widespread public rejection of the unjustifiable COVID-19 policies, we are at a moment in time where massive reforms and improvements in healthcare are possible. It is my sincere hope this opportunity won't get diverted into smokescreens like DEI that allow the industry to divide us and sustain its unethical practices that place profits before patients. Tell us the medical schools aren't ruining the medical establishment, or are they?
Oh, they are. I mean, they've been bought and sold since the 20s. You know, I mean, when you talk to physicians my age that have been practicing for a long time, and you say, how much information did you get when you were in medical school about nutrition? Most people will say, I don't remember any. I specifically remember 5 hours. It was a 1 hour class, 5 days a week, and that was it. I remember it because I was really interested in it. My dad was a chiropractor, and I grew up on vitamins, and, they'd always kind of liked nutritional things. I was hoping to learn about it. We never did. And so, it's all pharmaceutical driven. You were talking about the NIH, who puts money into colleges, right? Well, think about the money that they put into medical schools. And, the NIH puts money into medical schools for research that they bring forth a promising new drug. And then once it gets to the place where it could be commercialized, they don't sell it to the pharmaceutical industry. They give it to the pharmaceutical industry. So billions and maybe even trillions of our tax dollars go into developing a new drug that then goes to the pharmaceutical industry to be patented for 22 years and to commercialize it. I was at a meeting once, Steve, this was quite a few years ago now, when I learned this information. I was shocked. And I actually talked to the people after the fact. I said, so why doesn't the pharmaceutical industry, who's going to take this look at how much money had been put into the R&D by the American people, and let's say it was $5 billion, just make up a number, $5 billion. And you've got 22 years on this patent to sell this drug. Why don't you pay that $5 billion back to the NIH so they can create more grants and we can recycle the money? And you know what they said to me? I mean, here's a little person from Ohio. They were seriously dumbfounded and went, that's a really great idea. I don't know why we don't do that. These are people from the NIH.
It's like the Golden Gate Bridge, it's paid for 25 years ago, but they still keep asking for tolls. It's either they're bad at math or they're greedy.
they're greedy for sure.
Yeah. Pierre Corey, really uncomfortable facts. Dr. Pierre Corey, after taking a closer look at childhood vaccines. When you look at the history and the science that supports those vaccines, you really learn some really, really uncomfortable facts. One of the most glaring is the wealth of data showing the absolute explosion in chronic illness that's coincident with the explosion in the childhood vaccines. The godfather of vaccines, Dr. Stanley Plotkin, admits under oath he got paid for all the big pharma companies while consulting for an independent report on whether or not vaccines cause autism. For some extremely odd reason, he didn't feel the need to disclose that in the report. What do you know about childhood vaccines and autism?
Well, a couple things. For the last 23 years, I've written books about it. I've talked about it, and I put almost 50,000 hours of research into problems associated with vaccines. So what do I think about what Pierre Corey said? I wish he would call me. If you're listening to this, Pierre, I've been trying to get in touch with you for almost a year and a half. And I've had many people who are mutual friends of ours reach out to you to call me because I know 50,000 more than you do about this because I put in 50,000 hours in the research. You don't have to start from zero and learn it the hard way. Stand on the shoulders of people that have come before you, acknowledge their work and say, I'm going to take this ball and run with it instead of acting like you just discovered it and nobody had ever talked about it before. So I've been talking about this for 23 years. I've written books about it, hundreds of articles. And when I talk about the connection between vaccines and autism is at the far end of the scale of vaccine injury. To the left of that is asthma, allergies, eczema, ADD, insulin-dependent diabetes, cancer, all kinds of eczema, rashes, disabilities, neurological complications, all these different things that are caused by injecting foreign matter into little children, which is what vaccination is. You inject foreign matter that doesn't belong there. God didn't forget to give these kids an immune system. They were born healthy and whole. We did not need to poison them. And now children, if they're fully vaccinated between birth and 18 years of age, they get 72 shots and almost 13,000 micrograms of aluminum and almost 600 milligrams of mercury injected into their bodies. That doesn't belong there. And is it any wonder that we've got the sickest children, the most mentally deranged children from an early age, and now we're giving COVID shots starting at 3 months of age. And when those parents start seeing their children dying, maybe then they'll wake up, not only to the COVID disaster, but to the entire vaccination schedule.
We had Zoe O'Toole on here, who edited the book Turtles All the Way Down. So we're alerted to that on the Mill Creek View, and thank you for what you just said. Judy Mikovits, PhD, Marburg virus disease (MVD) from Wuhan bat feces introduced and added to Vero monkey kidney cell lines in 2011. The cell lines were never cleaned up and have been used in every vaccine manufacturing process without safety testing or testing of the ingredients. It's been injection by injection all along. It's been infection by injection all along. Is it going to be another case-demic, she asks. That's how they did it last time. They lie, start the PCR testing, and create a case-demic, just like every pandemic since HIV, AIDS, Zika, Ebola, H1N1. The Marburg virus disease, MVD, has been in the polio vaccine since 2012, along with SARS-CoV-2 since 2005. Stop all tests and injections. Do you know her, and do you agree with her?
Yeah, Judy's a good friend of mine. And I totally agree with her. And she says when people are starting down this whole thing about there's no such thing as a virus, she said there's no such thing as a natural virus anymore since they started using it inside of using cell lines of aborted fetal tissue, using monkey tissue cells to create cultures. We need to distinguish between natural viruses and man-made gobbledygook stuff that we're calling a virus.
Judy also said remdesivir is ivermectin with cyanide. Do you agree with that?
I don't know that. I don't know about that.
All right. She said it. I haven't interviewed her yet, but I'd love to.
Judy's usually pretty spot on. It's just not, I kind of let remdesivir be with Brian Artis. That was sort of his flag to fly. And he was such an expert on it. And Brian actually really does literally have a photographic memory, like a photographic memory. And so when he quotes these different studies and different things, I know that it's spot on. And so, remdesivir was his football to carry down the field, during COVID, and he did a great job of it. So I didn't spend a lot of time looking at remdesivir. I knew there were other people that knew it better and researched better than what I did.
Okay. I think I saw it on Judy's Twitter within the last couple of days also. So if anyone wants to question me, please ask her what I'm talking about, but that's okay. Here's something that's out there: 222 research papers supporting vaccine autism causation by Ginger Taylor, MS6/26. Oh, that's the date. 6/26/2023. So not long ago. Mainstream research has found that vaccines and their ingredients can cause the underlying medical conditions that committed physicians and researchers are commonly finding in children who have been given an autism diagnosis. These conditions include gastrointestinal damage, immune system impairment, chronic infection, mitochondrial disorders, autoimmune conditions, neurological regression, glial cell activation, interleukin-6 secretion dysregulation, brain inflammation, loss of integrity of the blood-brain barrier, seizures, synaptic dysfunction. Wow. Dendritic cell dysfunction, mercury poisoning, aluminum toxicity, gene activation, ulceration, impairment, so many more. The question, of course, is if you had a child today, would you sign them up for these vaccines, even if they weren't allowed to go to school?
Well, first of all, I was not vaccinated as a child. I didn't have any of the childhood vaccines. When I was born in 1958, which was kind of the peak of when, the polio vaccine came out in 1954. And my dad had been in the Korean War, and my grandfather was also a chiropractor. So he grew up on vitamins and chiropractic manipulation and didn't, back in the day, I mean, there was just the shots that they gave people when they went off to war, which was tetanus and typhoid and probably smallpox. And he got so sick. He said he'd never been so sick in his life. And then when he came back and he went to became a chiropractor, and it was all the literature that was coming out in the early 50s showing that children were becoming paralyzed after they got the shot, not by a virus that was out in circulation. He and my mom decided when I was born that they weren't going to poison me. They weren't going to give me any of those things ever. And I never had it. So I had age appropriate measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, pertussis probably twice. And I think that I'm healthier for it. My body did the right immune response at the appropriate age to respond to appropriate infections. I had very high fevers. Fever, I actually wrote an ebook. It's called The Importance of Fever. That fever is really important for activating your immune system and activating your white blood cells and to break apart, those things that aren't supposed to be there. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I would never, ever inject any children with any foreign matter and somehow think it's doing anything but harming them, any of the childhood vaccines. And as far as not going to public school, I think they should shut down those indoctrination centers, and every parent in America should homeschool their kids. I mean, there are incredible Christian organizations out there. I've interviewed probably 5 or 6, maybe 7 different homeschooling organizations on my podcast. There's lots of choices. And I think one of the main reasons parents don't homeschool is because they think it's a full-time job. Because when you send your kids to school and they're at school from 8 in the morning till 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I mean, parents think that they've got to be that school teacher from 8 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, and they just can't do it. They don't realize that it only takes a couple of hours in the morning to get through what they need to do for their classes. And then they can do things that the kids really want to do, that they're very interested in, that will develop a vocation or develop an interest down the road, or teach them how to have life skills, like how to be an arborist or how to be a carpenter or an electrician or a plumber or something like that will be good, that they'll have something to do their whole life. Or if they're an artist, it gives them time to paint. Or if they like frogs and bugs, it gives them time to go outside. I mean, it's not something you have to do full time. And if you can do it as a collective, maybe this parent's better at English and that one's better at science and that one's better at math. This one does stuff with physics or economics, or it's what we need to be doing. It's what the Bible tells us to do, is to bring up our children in the way that we want them to be, so they will not wander from it in their older age. Instead, we send our kids to these indoctrination schools that are just like war zones. And so to vaccinate your kids so that they can go to school, I think every parent in America needs to rethink that.
Maybe that is the silver lining, is that there has been a huge explosion of homeschooling since that happened, when we all got to look over the shoulders of our young kids and see what they were actually learning in the classroom. And it turned out to be nothing at all.
And now when they're teaching these kids as young as second graders, first graders, pornographic material,
Right.
That they're teaching these kids how to do pornographic acts. And there was a video that I watched. It was a Black man who was standing up and very articulate and was standing up in front of a school, like the school board at a
Pastor
school board
John
meeting.
Amanchukwu Sr., I bet he's been on this show.
Maybe.
John Amanchukwu? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and he was reading from the textbook.
Yeah.
And the school board told him to shut up. That's dirty language. He said, wait a minute, you're saying that I can't say this to adults in a room, but you think it's okay for my child to read this? And I saw another video from somebody in the UK that was showing us the textbooks that were being shown to his second grader. And he had to blur out the pictures because he said, if I just actually showed you these, Rumble would call it pornographic material and would shut down my channel. But this is the type of, so I had to blur it out because it was pornographic material. But this is what my third grader brought home the other night for me to help him with homework.
These are the same people that are telling them that these vaccines are safe and effective. Can the vaccinated or the multiple boosted, some as many as 4, unbelievably, be detoxed?
In my opinion, they can't, not at this point in time. And as long as I've been talking about vaccines, the entire vaccination schedule, I've always said, once you vaccinate, you can't unvaccinate. Once you have injected foreign matter into your body, you can maybe clean it up and get a little bit healthier, but you never go back to baseline. Once you get that stuff in your system, and that's even more so true with the COVID shots. We have no idea how long those messenger RNAs continue to replicate in my spike proteins. I read a report that it was at least 17 months, which is about as long as they've been out in circulation, that people are still making spike protein. And we know now that there's graphene oxide, which kind of goes back to the magnetic thing that you asked me. The graphene oxide, the magnetic hydrogel. There's all kinds of different hydrogels. Knowing they now think that 5% of the lots cause 90% of the damage. And so, we know. I think isn't that site? It's How Bad Is My Shot? howbadismyshot.com, I think, is where you can look up your lot number and know and how many reactions we're having. So, and all these people that are making claims about take this vitamin and it'll get the spike protein out of your body. I can't understand why they're allowed to do that. I mean, first and foremost, there's not a commercially available blood test, urine test, saliva test, stool test. There's not a commercially available test to measure the amount of spike protein, graphene oxide, or hydrogel in your body. So you don't know how much is there. So if you don't know how much you're starting with, and I take this stuff or I do this procedure, how do I know it comes down to here? How do I know there's no measuring it? How do you know that worked? You don't. And even if you could... And even if you could get it out of your circulatory system, how do you get it out of your heart muscle and your kidneys and your liver and your brain and your lungs and all these things, those proteins that are adhered to those tissues? You can't. And I've read multiple reports. Peter McCullough was one of them. Dr. Levy was another one, cardiologist, that said, even if you've had just one shot, you have some level of heart damage from that. And so everybody wants, I did this horrible thing and now I regret it. How do I get it out of my body? Well, maybe somebody will figure something out, but I personally, as my personal opinion, do not believe at this point in time that that's possible.
So hepatitis B, it's been a mystery to me. It's a liver infection caused by the Hep B virus, HBV. For most people, hepatitis B is short-term, lasts less than 6 months, I guess. Again, I'm not a doctor, you are. Why do we have to give newborns Hep B shots? Isn't it a sexually transmitted disease anyway? They're not sexually active at birth.
I don't know why we're still giving it. I don't know why we gave it in the first place. The paper that came out that said we need to give hepatitis B to newborn infants, like 2 days old, was written in 1991. And it was about a 16 or 18 page paper. And the main reason to give it to newborn infants in America was because hepatitis B was endemic in pregnant women in Southeast Asia. Yeah, exactly. And when the manufacturers went in front of Congress and the Congress said, so where's your data on safety on newborns? And they go, we don't have any. We trialed this vaccine on 5 to 10-year-old kids. and Congress let them get away with it. And the drug companies kept selling it, and the pediatricians kept pushing it. And here we are, 20 some years later, all those kids are brain damaged. They all are, to a certain degree, some probably more so than others.
Wow. So the World Health Organization Health Emergencies Program was established on 1 July 2016. Just had an anniversary, by Director General Margaret Chan at the request of the World Health Assembly. The Biden administration has called for a new global health mechanism to finance global health security and a global health threat council to stay ahead of emerging pandemics. I just read the Biden administration is setting the stage to hand ultimate control of America's healthcare system and U.S. national sovereignty over to the World Health Organization. Do you think that's even likely?
It's likely because it's the Biden administration, and it's only possible if the Congress lets them get away with it, because they've changed the name from treaty. They changed it to an accord. It's not a World Health Organization treaty, because they know that would have to be ratified by Congress. So now they're calling it an accord that everybody can join on to. Margaret Chan, isn't that interesting? She was head of the World Health Organization in 2005 during bird flu. So, these people have been around and they've been planning this stuff for a long time. But, have you interviewed Paul Alexander?
No.
He's really great. And he was on Trump. He was the advisor to Trump during Operation Warp Speed and totally disagreed with it and tried to get him to not do it. And it's another whole story. But I interviewed him right when they started talking about this treaty and the World Health Organization treaty. And he said to me, he goes, when you're growing up and you become an epidemiologist, you think the two best jobs in the world are either to work at the CDC or at the World Health Organization. He said, I worked at the World Health Organization. He said, it's a good old boy network. And the best, he said, they can't be in charge of anything. The only thing that we should be doing with with the World Health Organization is dismantling it down to the studs and starting it to rebuild it over again. He said we cannot let them be in charge of global health. And I totally stand on what he says.
Unfortunately, yeah.
It's really a horrible, horrible institution. Horrible.
Yeah. And according to a book by Dr. Scott Atlas, who was also there with him, apparently, Deborah Birx, White House coronavirus response coordinator for the Trump administration, controlled most of the messaging and communications coming from the coronavirus task force to the American people and governors. We talked about that. Rochelle Walensky just stepped down. How do you feel about her, the new nominee, Mandy Cohen? I doubt she's the solution. And the FDA in general, they seem like a rubber stamp for every new thing. So the American regulatory institution, how do you feel about it?
It needs to blow up and go away. It needs another one of those things that we need to blow up and go away and start over with people that are not being bought and paid for. What is the number? It's some high number, like 60% of the FDA's annual budget comes directly from fast track fees that come from the pharmaceutical industry. I don't know much about the new nominee for the World Health for the CDC, other than I know that she's a World Economic Forum graduate. And so she's been part of that club. And so that means that she's going to be a puppet to institute more of what they want to do to us, not for us, but to us through the World Economic Forum and all of their minions. So that's a bit frightening that, we have allowed evil in through our gates. The Substack that I wrote on the Bible and the Constitution, I just published it a couple of days ago. Really, our founding fathers tried to put into all of these things, and through the, like our First Amendment rights, our Second Amendment rights, all of these things, rights to habeas corpus, rights to search and seizure. All of these things were set up to protect us. And we, the people, have allowed evil in our midst. We have, because we were fat, dumb, and happy, and we could do whatever we wanted, and nobody really bothered us, and we always had food in the grocery store, and we could go to Costco whenever we wanted and get on an airplane and go somewhere. We didn't pay attention. And now that we've got evil in our midst, we've got, the Visigoths at the door, that we're about to crash into the Roman Empire and destroy it from the north. That's where we're at. We're right there. We have been infiltrated from the inside out, and we've allowed it to happen. And only God can reverse it. only God we can, if we stand on 2 Chronicles 7:14 and we really, if his people, I mean, even God's people are not praying and doing the things that we're supposed to do and being activated for him. We're not wanting to talk about God. Oh my gosh, I might insult somebody or offend somebody. So come be offended in front of the Lord. That's what I say to people to do. And we've allowed it to infiltrate our colleges, our high school, our places of worship. We know that most of the pastors nowadays are hirelings. They're really not, they're really not even Christians, but yet they are up there wanting to lead a church. Now we've got churches of Satan. We've got these new LGBTQ churches that are opening up. Seriously. I mean, if God suddenly took the heel of his boot and squashed us like a bug, who could blame him? Yeah, and he won't do it except for his remnant of people that are still here. And I think we need to get busy.
You have time for 2 more questions? We're way into overtime, so I would respect it if you say you can't, but I have 2 more questions, and I'll let you go.
Okay.
All right. So the list of adolescent immunization schedules we talked about is huge. Do you think these puberty blockers are linked to retarding the hypothalamus, which regulates emotion, maybe leading to these mass killings? That's speculation on my part for now. Do you think our future is a generation of vaccine-injured, confused, murderous people as the future of America?
The future's here. This isn't the future. We have arrived. So the answer is yes.
Okay. So last question is, if you had to do it all over again, because you spent a lot of years in education and working residencies and all that stuff, if you had to do it all over again and a little girl came to you and said, Dr. Tenpenny, should I be a doctor when I grow up? What would you tell her?
I had a lot of little girls and little boys come and ask me that question. And quite frankly, I would tell them no, not in the current environment. Because first of all, you think you're going into becoming a doctor because you think you're going to help people. That's not what the profession is about anymore. The profession is about following rules, algorithm-driven medicine, passing out pills, like being it's not about health. It's not about finding the underlying cause of conditions and fixing that, which is what restores health. It's about suppressive medicine with a pharmaceutical product. And if you really, let's say you're an unvaccinated young person that comes and asks me that question, in order to get into medical school, you're going to have to get caught up on all of the childhood vaccines, all the adolescent vaccines. You're going to be required to get a COVID shot. You're going to be required to get annual flu shots. Is that what you want for your body? And do you think that somehow injuring you can put you into a position to help other people? And you're going to come out of that institution somewhere around $400,000 in debt. So you're going to be a slave to that job for a very long time because there's not a lot of lateral movement. You can't go from being a doctor to a pilot, commercial airline pilot, very easily. I just made that up. Yeah. So, there was a person that I interviewed for one of our podcasts, and he was talking about how he has a homeschooling program. And he tells parents that if you're willing to put your child through college at, say, $50,000 a year, which is kind of what state colleges are, or $100,000 a year for a private school, why don't you take that $400,000 that you are going to put into 4 years of education, set it aside, and you become the bank for your entrepreneurial child's new business as they start it. And you become an investor in your child's future, and you teach them a trade, or, you teach them something that they want to do that they can make. And you set that money aside as a way to fund their future rather than funding their debt. And I really thought that is such a great idea, because right now, to me, the only reason in the world to go to college is if you want to go into a profession that really requires it, like being a dentist, an accountant, a CPA, a lawyer, yes, a doctor. If you want to do something like that, you have to go to get those pieces of paper to go into that vocation. But if you're going to college to major in Russian literature and oboe, which a patient of mine's granddaughter did, I mean, seriously, don't waste the money and waste the time. Don't be disrespectful to your parents' money that they're trying to do to help you. Don't be disrespectful to the country's money if you're going there on public funds and taxpayer dollars. Do something, I'm a really big fan of the year between, 1 or 2 or 3 years in between. There's nothing ever that says we're supposed to go from grade school to middle school to high school to college. We put that into people's brains in the 1950s out of the GI Bill, when all of these people who didn't get killed in the Vietnam War were, not in the Korean War, were coming back, and we didn't know what to do. Well, let's send them to college. That's the least we can do for the service of their time. And where we got this indoctrination that everybody has to go to college. Well, I could tell you there's a lot of kids that are not college material. There's a lot of kids that really would not do well in college. They would rather be a fireman, a policeman, a farmer, anything else. And so the year in between of going and exploring, what do you really want to do for the rest of your life? You mean like you at 18 thinks you know? Guess again, bucko, you really don't. And so now is a good time to kind of do that. So I guess that's a really long-winded way of saying I think this whole thing about college. In fact, I wrote an article a while back. It was on Lou. I wrote it for a different newspaper, and it was called 11 Things to Do Except Other Than College. And it was about an apprenticeship and about taking time off and really figuring out what you want to be. College will always be there. If 5 years from now, 8 years from now, I had my best friend from college, her cousin went to college when he was in his 40s to be an accountant, because that's what he kind of always wanted to do. But he got married young and he had a family. He waited till his family was grown, and then he went to college. And so, it's always going to be there. It's not anything that you have to do right now, like the powers that be would lead you to believe.
Yeah, I agree. My mom graduated from high school or college the year I graduated from high school. So it's totally doable. We are at the end here. We are way past time. I'm so sorry, but thank you for your generosity and for being just willing to lay it all out there and tell us everything I asked. I really, really appreciate that. Tell my listeners where they can go to find out everything about you and more. Social media.
Everything sort of buttons up at drtenpenny.com. So it's DR, no period, TEN. P as in Peter, ENNY, drtenpenny.com. We have our podcast there. We have our store there, our apparel stuff. All of the events that we're going to be doing will be there. And if you please, if you go there, sign up for our newsletter. My team works really hard on those newsletters. I really want people to read them, even if they don't buy anything from them and stuff like that, just because they're beautiful and they spend a lot of time making it. Well, my Substacks are drtenpenny.substack.com. That's I Am the Evidence, that comes out on Saturday. We also have, on Walking with God, which is tenpennywalkwithgod.substack.com. That comes out on Sundays. Those are, our podcasts. So I do 7 podcasts a week. I do 3 on Monday, 2 on Tuesday, and 2 on Thursday. And so, all that stuff about the podcast is all on the drtenpenny.com website. We have 4 different membership levels that we think that we've created something for everybody's time and budget. And so your monthly support from our premium podcast members is what allows us to do all the stuff that we do. So I'm always really grateful for that.
All right. Well, God bless you. And again, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. You're great.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
All right. What a show, folks. What a show. Welcome to my quotes for the day. My goodness, imagine going through life and not knowing these things. Just go to Rumble or Spotify or iTunes and hit the subscribe button and follow us. Believing myths about vaccines is not the same as getting the facts, and that is the core problem. Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. Heard of her? Yes, you have. Here's a few more hero doctors we mentioned. Pierre Corey, MD, NPA. This idiotic strategy of scaring folks by conflating a human medicine with an animal one has concocted months ago. They opened fire this week, and we are currently under an all-out blitz/bombardment from the media and agencies, and it ain't working. Docs are waking up. Finally, Dr. Pierre Corey. Remember that? That was about ivermectin being called horse paste. Robert W. Malone, MD. What happens to confidence in public health and U.S. government if ivermectin turns out to be safe and effective for COVID, and the genetic vaccines turn out to have significantly safety issues. This looks like a very plausible scenario from where I sit, June 12th, 2021. Guess he was right. Can he say I told you so now? Good doctors, are doing unthinkable things, like injecting biologically active messenger RNA that produces the pathological spike protein into pregnant women. I think when the doctors wake up from their trance, they're going to be shocked to think what they've done to people. Peter A. McCullough, really talking about going woke. What do all three of these doctors have in common? They each wrote articles at the Mill Creek View newspaper when nobody else would listen to them, and Baylor University disowned Dr. McCullough. See, lovers of truth making a positive impact in our community. That's my promise to you in every show opening. Promise kept. One more. May he rest in peace. I have no problem falling in battle. This is a hill that we need to die on. Dr. Vladimir Zelenko. Dr. Zelenko will go down in history after all is revealed as one of the good medical docs who lived during a time when most of his colleagues were not good. They were corruptible. He was not. He studied the virus in depth until he found what worked as a treatment, then shared his Zelenko protocols on his website for free to anyone who needed it. Of course, he was vilified for doing so. I take a Z-Stack every day, but I'm not your doctor, so don't take my advice. But one combo vitamin, D, C, zinc, and quercetin work to keep me COVID-free. Not even sure I ever got it. That's it for this episode. Really hope you liked it. Thank you, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, for being willing to look out for patients and uphold that Hippocratic oath to first do no harm and tell the truth. This is goodbye for a little while. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, even while I'm gone, and pass it around, even in reruns. We only grow with your help, and still ad-free. Back in August. Enjoy the reruns. Maybe off air, we'll get that peace in our time. I'll work on it in Europe. Glory to God. At Heartland Journal, we don't just write about the Heartland, we're part of it. Whether you're in Montana cattle country, next to an Idaho data center in a drought, or from an Ohio manufacturing town, this is your platform. Got a story tip? A perspective we need to hear? We want it. This podcast and website exists because readers like you step up. Help us keep the lights on and the reporting honest. Visit heartlandjournal.com or our Substack, Heartland Journal, and subscribe to our ad-free premium content. Together, we're keeping authentic journalism alive in Middle America. I'm Steve Abramowitz, your host of the Heartland Journal podcast. Thanks for listening.
It's a long way to Nashville from that Napa Valley vine. Put me on a road less traveled. Lord, now I know why. God knew I'd get there in His perfect time.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.
Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.